Hey, what's up? I'm Jason Howell from twit.tv and I am here with the Motorola DROID RAZR. It's a dual-core 1.2 gigahertz TI OMAP 4430 processor. Has 1 gig of RAM. It's a 4G LTE phone, so it's got really fast data speeds. It's a 4.3-inch QHD display, 960 by 540, so the resolution is pretty reasonable. As you can see, it's thin. It's definitely one of the thinnest phones that I think I've ever used. It has an 8-megapixel rear camera on the back with an LED flash. It also has a front-facing camera. And finally, you've got some nice little ports here. We've got a micro SD card slot in there. And on the top, you have your micro USB and HDMI. First off, let's just start with design. As I said, it's incredibly thin and light. It's actually 7.1 millimeters thin at its thinnest point. But I should say, as a cautionary tale, this thinness comes with a risk. A friend of mine who bought this phone, he keeps the phone in his pocket, as a lot of people do. He went and hopped into his truck, and next time he pulled it out, the screen underneath the Gorilla Glass was actually cracked. So keep that in mind. Though it's thin, and that's a nice thing, it could also be its downfall. Just be careful with it. The screen is a Super AMOLED pentile screen. That's important to know because pentile is actually a technology that, if you look really closely at it, it can kind of show a little bit of weakness. You can kind of see that pixels are shared in between lines above and below those pentile dots. And as a result, kind of fine lines in fonts, the really small fonts, grayscale images, that sort of thing can kind of show those edges. And so to my eyes, I definitely see it on this phone. Probably a good idea for you to check it out yourself and see what you think about that. Camera performance was better than I'm used to seeing from Motorola. I've never been too fond of Motorola cameras and their performance just in speed of taking a picture as well as the quality of the pictures. But I actually really liked the camera on this phone a lot more than I expected to. Here, I'm going to use our camera person, Jeff Stewart, to focus on here. Autofocus, picture, picture, picture. It's pretty rapid, and that's kind of what I'm looking for when I want a good camera phone, to be able to kind of take those pictures in rapid succession. It's good quality pictures, if well lit, HD video on the front as well as the back, so you can take full HD videos with either side. I definitely made a reasonable amount of calls with the phone, and I'd say the call quality was crystal clear on my end as well as the recipient's end. One thing about Motorola's version of the Android OS is, of course, what they used to call blur. I guess they don't call it that anymore. I don't even think it has a name quite yet, but it's still kind of the blur that you may have used with slight modifications. I would say that overall, you get that feeling that Moto Blur is kind of slowing things down. One thing that they do include on here, however, that is extremely handy is something called Smart Actions. It's basically an easier to use, prettier looking tasker. And what that means is you can set up conditions. So as you can see right here, I have a charging condition. If I open that up, I've set it so that when I'm charging, display timeout never happens. And I like that because when I'm in the car, when I plug it into the car dock, it keeps the display on and never turns it off. It's very versatile and really easy to program, so I was very surprised and happy to play around with that. Overall, I'd say the performance was great with this. Minus the slowdowns of Moto Blur, games played without a hiccup and pretty fluidly, and no slowdown on those. Switching apps was pretty snappy. Now onto the battery, which could be a sticking point for some people because the phone, in order to achieve its incredible thinness, has a non-removable battery. Now, the battery sits behind this Kevlar backing, which is actually, by the way, pretty nice for keeping the phone sliding out of your hands for the most part. But you can't take this case off. You're pretty much stuck with the battery that you have. Thankfully, I got pretty good battery life out of this phone. Just a few random other pieces of information to know about it. It has a locked bootloader. And Ice Cream Sandwich, though it doesn't ship with the phone, Motorola has come out and said that it will be released sometime in 2012. So one final thing about the Motorola RAZR is something called Webtop. This is Motorola's kind of approach to allowing you to use your Motorola phone, newer Motorola phones, in ways that you might use a desktop computer. And one way that actually enables that right here is the LapDock 100. It's an expensive piece of gear. It's $249.99. But as you can see, it's like a laptop, and it's a shell with a built-in battery. So if I plug in my Motorola RAZR in the back, the display will turn on and it'll kind of boot into Webtop mode. And this just basically allows you to use the power of your Motorola RAZR or newer Motorola phones in a much larger format. I will say one thing though, and if you haven't noticed by looking at the device, you'll see it's pretty small. Like obviously it's by design because they want this to be portable. The keys are just too small for my big fat fingers, and the little touchpad down there, it's very easy for me to touch the wrong thing. So I wouldn't say that it necessarily made me more efficient in testing it out. And then aside from that, you've got your typical car mount, which I actually really liked a lot. I use this all the time. And this is the HD station. It's $99.99, and it essentially replicates a lot of the functionality of the Lapdock 100, but in a more compact base unit, so you can plug in your own accessories with the USB on back. I guess I'll just go ahead and say pros, the things that I really like about this: incredibly light and thin. It's impressive camera performance, and it's pretty snappy and responsive. The cons, like I said, with the display, the Pentile technology, you either see the rigidness of it or not. Non-removable battery for sure, and as I said also, its svelteness might also be its downfall if you're not too careful. But overall, I really enjoyed playing around with the Motorola RAZR. I enjoyed it way more than I think I expected I would, so it is absolutely recommended for me. I would say buy it. Go to a Verizon store and check it out, and I think you might walk out with it. I'm Jason Howell with Twit.tv. Thanks for watching.